Thank you, John, and good evening, everybody. My name is Ramon Marca, and I'll be hosting the event this evening. And it is my pleasure to introduce Eva Bosch, a Catalan painter based in London, whose work spans painting, writing, and moving image. She is from a small village near Barcelona called Montmany, Figueroa. Although she was born in Barcelona, but as we were discussing recently, that's more of a technicality because there was no hospital in the small village. In the early 70s, she moved to London, where she trained at the Chelsea College of Art, completed an MA in painting at the Royal College of Art, and later received a scholarship to the Rijks Academy in Amsterdam. In 1995, she received the Paulo Krasner Foundation Award, a significant international recognition that acknowledged her strength and independence of her practice. I think what distinguishes Eva's work is the depth of research that underpins it. And over many years, she's got engaged in research in prehistoric art, both from the point of view of, I would say, sociological elements and artistic elements, and it's a fascination that you have for prehistoric art. Material plays a crucial role in her art, and she's worked with oil, wax, bitumen, varnish, and layered surfaces. Her paintings feel built, worked, and excavated, as though they carry traces of time within them. The surface becomes a site of accumulation, both physical and conceptual. She's exhibited in the UK, France, Spain, the Netherlands, and Germany, amongst other places, and recently her exhibition Shoes and Stars at Benjamin Rhodes Arts brought together works from the 90s. She's also lectured on Pablo Picasso, for instance, at the National Gallery, Joan Miró at Tate Modern, and directed the documentary Picasso's Women Through 7 Works, shown at the Instituto Cervantes in London. We've talked a lot about her artistic output as a painter, but she's also a writer, and we are going to talk about her latest book. As a writer, her first book in English, Foreigner, was written in 2012. 22 poems followed in 2018. And I would say that, because I know that her tenacity as an editor secured a very, very good translation of a masterpiece of Catalan literature called Els Sots Celestes, Dark Veils, and it was translated by Alan Yates. Her interest and knowledge in prehistoric art, as I mentioned, also is displayed in her chapter on light and shadow in the Oxford Handbook of Light in Archaeology from 2021. Her work resists spectacle and its interpretation. Instead, it asks for attention, patience, and openness. In a moment when contemporary art often moves fast, her painting reminds us of something slower and more fundamental: the enduring human need to make marks, leave traces, and to search for meaning through images. Please join me in welcoming Eva Bosch. So the first thing, when Eva asked me to host this presentation, I thought, why me? I love literature, but I'm certainly not an expert. What bonds us is we are both Catalan expats, and we do contribute to Catalan culture abroad. In my case, my contribution is much smaller than Eva's, but I've been programming Catalan cinema at the Cambridge Film Festival for over 15 years, and also organized some other screenings, like at the ICA in London. Interestingly, Eva said that she wanted to get an insight on her book from the filmic point of view, and I thought it was very interesting. And my first thought after reading the book was the Nouvelle Vague, the French New Wave cinema that you probably all know. But that was a sort of instinctive. I thought, yes, I think that's it. And then sort of I went and thought, let me look at my books and the different elements of Nouvelle Vague cinema. And it proved me right. One of the important elements is immediacy in storytelling, and that's something that I felt while reading Eva's book. Record, continuity, Nouvelle Vague cinema broke with a traditional narrative convention, and again, Eva's book breaks completely with that traditional narrative in many different and exciting ways. The element of including autobiographical elements in the output, the artistic output, and even personal obsessions, which coheres the cinema, really emphasizes the author type of cinema. The use of ordinary characters, and even the element of the movement, which is difficult to translate into the written, the literary world. In cinema, we have the handheld camera, we have brisk editing, and we have, if you think about a cinema like Breathless, it becomes almost relentless, this sense of movement. And the way Eva writes the structures of the paragraph also gave me that same sense of movement. So I'm certain, Eva, that this is what I would say for me. That's my personal connection. But then thinking about all your whole work, I couldn't help but think about a Basque painter that I got to know, and I spoke to him, Jose Antonio Sistiaga. He actually was so interested in movement that he painted directly onto not only 35mm film, but even IMAX, the 1570, the one at the BFI IMAX. He painted because he was so obsessed with movement that he had to move away from the canvas into the film. So that's more about what we've talked about movement. But in terms of the book, for me, it is undoubtedly nouvelle vague. And I find that, like in those films produced in France, in Eva's book, the goal is not so much the resolution of a story, but the experience or experiences described. We will start, as we said, we'll use fragments of the book read in Catalan and translation in English to talk about the main themes of the book. But I want to start, Eva, to ask about the title, La nena del socaire, in particular because socaire is a word that 95% of Catalans wouldn't understand, including myself. So can you tell us about the title, please?
Well, a socaire is a person that makes clogs with G, clogs. Yeah? And so, I mean, in Catalan we have the sclop, which is made of solid wood. You simply get the wood out, and that would be the sclop. But the socaire is the one that makes the shoe, which has got the sole of wood and the top of leather. That's a socaire. And my father was actually making this type of shoes, and that's why the village being a very small village, I was the nena del socaire, I was the little girl of the clock maker. So that's the clock.
Thank you. So should we start with the first fragment, please?
45.000 pessetes afegides al que ja hi ha a la llibreta suma un total insuficient. Aviat acabarà la subvenció de l'INEM i la feina fent classes d'anglès s'atura al començ de l'estiu. D'alternatives n'hi ha sempre. L'anglès és la llengua d'avui, tothom vol aprendre-la. La constància de les classes i els horaris, però, sovint trenquen tota l'harmonia de l'ordre d'aquell que es dedica a l'expressió artística. Allí, al taulell del banc, hi ha un pòster. Premi per a novel·la catalana, 2.500.000 pessetes. Mentre dejo la llibreta amb una mà i amb l'altra aguanto la bossa de plàstic plena de draps vells que sempre guardo per portar al taller, rellegeixo les bases del concurs. Un braç gruixut m'obre cavallerosament la porta de sortida al passeig de Gràcia. El dilema entre tornar a casa amb autobús o amb metro es torna a fer present. L'autobús em costa 35 pessetes més, però em deixa davant del taller i puc pensar àmpliament durant el trajecte.
45,000 pesetas added to what is already in my account still comes to an insufficient total. Soon the unemployment benefit will run out and the job teaching English will come to a halt at the beginning of summer. There are always alternatives. English is today's language. Everyone wants to learn it. The regularity of classes and fixed schedules, however, often shatter the harmony and order of those who devote themselves to artistic expression. I saw the poster at the bank's counter, Prize for Catalan Novel, 2,500,000 pesetas. While I put away the statement of account with one hand, and with the other held the plastic bag full of old rags I was keen to take to the studio, I reread the competition rules. A virile arm gallantly opened the door for me, leading out onto the Passage de Gracia. The dilemma of whether to go home by bus or by metro presents itself once again. The bus costs 35 pesetas more, but it drops me right in front of the studio, giving me more time to think at length during the journey.
So I think this beginning sets the scene for what I particularly found is very inspiring. The protagonist goes through many struggles, financial. I would say many have an element of adventure that is also very exciting. And I think there is a combination of bravery, wit, probably luck as well. But there is that determination to pursue the ambition to become an artist, which I found extremely inspiring. Would you agree with that perception of the protagonist?
Yes, and I suppose there is also a very strong element of foolishness. Yeah? So remember that this book was written in 30 years, so the beginning of the book has a certain naivety, I suppose, which I respected and I kept, you know. And at the beginning of the book, the protagonist, because I created the protagonist so that I could detach myself from what was obviously happening, and the protagonist at the beginning doesn't really have an objective. He's just sort of trying to find a place in this planet, you know. So there is nothing very clear in her mind what is it that she wants to do. She's full of energy and she wants to invest it somewhere, and that's how the protagonist starts. Yeah. So the passion for painting is something that comes later. So at the beginning, I think there's a very, very strong element of foolishness.
But there is that element of search, looking for something.
Yes. Looking for something, but not sure what is it that she's looking for. Yeah.
Thank you. Next fragment, please.
Era la tardor i feia un fred holandès. Després de sopar i de discutir rabiosament sobre temes relacionats amb la pintura, ens vam arraulir l'un contra l'altre. Feia fred. En Carlos va suggerir de trucar un taxi o d'acompanyar-me a casa en bicicleta. Els taxis eren cars i era massa tard per anar en bicicleta a casa meva, o sigui que em va oferir de quedar-me. Un cop al llit, però, em vaig adonar que hi havia una raó per la qual no volia que em quedés. L'absurd d'uns rituals apresos és un fet tan obvi que sovint passa desapercebut. El mascle busca la femella i la femella diu que no, i així comença la seducció. Una femella que busca el mascle sembla trencar el ritual. El desig hi era prou, però alguna cosa estranya obstruïa el procés. No era pas la primera vegada que això em succeïa. Quan els processos naturals s'alteren, passen coses molt estranyes. Les bèsties no tenen aquests problemes. El racional no hi és pel mig. L'instint dona perfecció a l'acte. No hi ha ofensors ni ofesos.
It was autumn and there was a very Dutch cold in the air. After dinner and arguing bitterly about matters related to painting, we curled up against each other. It was freezing cold. Carlos suggested calling a taxi or taking me home by bicycle. Taxis were expensive and it was too late to cycle home, so he offered to let me stay. Once in bed, however, I realised there was a reason why he had not wanted me to stay. The absurdity of learned rituals is so obvious a fact that it often goes unnoticed. The male chases the female says no, and thus seduction begins. A female who goes after the male seems to break the ritual. The desire was certainly there, but something strange was blocking the process. It wasn't the first time this had happened to me. When natural processes are altered, very strange things happen. Animals don't have these problems. Reason doesn't interfere. Instinct gives perfection to the act. There are no offenders or offended.
Eva, you've mentioned that you had an interest in exploring certain stereotypes about male characters. There are many male characters in the book, and I find it interesting and also refreshing to move away from the male gaze in those stereotypes and having your approach, as I said, very refreshing. Yet, most of them are from the art world, and yet a lot of the attitudes are rather patriarchal or old-fashioned, which in a way surprised me a bit. So my question is with regards to your interest for the study of the stereotype and the contrast between, per se, modern, but habits that are rather old-fashioned.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the fact that the males are artists, I don't think that makes that much difference when it comes to what you are referring to. You know, we live in a patriarchal society, definitely. I mean, think of Millet and Trump and all these characters which are ruling the world. For example, the Epstein files, which we have at the moment in front of us. Sometimes I think that if the criminals had been women, probably they would all be in prison. But the fact that they're male, makes it possible to sort of keep on, pushing this kind of strange pyramid, which has really ruled the world until now. The fact that the characters in the book are artists, I don't think it makes very much difference in that sense. Men are men, so it's the same thing.
But you talk about, for instance, the simplicity of nature as opposed to the problems of social conventions, and that's why I chose this paragraph. In that, probably it would be much easier if things were to be expected beforehand, and I suppose that's your sort of conclusion, isn't it?
Well, that's why I chose this character. This is fiction, yeah? But this character, Carlos, had a bout of poliomyelitis or something, and he became impotent, yeah? And being a Latin American and used to this kind of facility which Latin Americans have for seduction and whatever, he could not possibly accept that he was impotent, So there was these strange stories going on. It would have been a lot easier if he said to me, look, this is what happened, And so I thought that was really incredible, it was fascinating. When we were friends, we could talk about so many things, and yet when it came to some things so very particular, then there was this wall. It was impossible to actually break it through, So I think that's why the character is interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Jo era de poble. Coneixia el gust dels pallers i de la paret de darrere la font cap al tard i amb la bombeta fosa. La primera passió vaig viure-la als 5 anys, amb el fill al forner. Romeo i Julieta al Vallès Oriental. Els nostres pares eren enemics, qüestió d'interessos monetaris. Et compraré un ranxo a Texas quan ens casem i ens fem grans, em va dir, amagat en un portal en sortida nocturna. També ell va deixar-me per una nena de cabells rossos i rissos amples. El pecat tan gros que els genitals amagaven, segons ens van explicar a mesura que ens sortien pèls vora les extremitats, els feien tan lletjos que van passar molts anys fins que em vaig atrevir a mirar-los en detall. De tota manera, els genitals no feien cap falta en aquells tendres dies. Agafar la mà d'un nen, a menys que fos de les instruccions del mossèn que feia catecisme, era un pecat prou gros per anar a petar a l'infern. Si algú et veia les calces, calia confessar-se'n per si de cas s'havia tractat d'un descuit condemnable. Tot això ens va crear un planeta de desitjos imaginaris que encenien la carn amb una sola mirada masculina.
I was a village girl. I knew the unmistakable smell of haystacks and the wall behind the village fountain at dusk, with the light bulb burnt out. I experienced my first passion at the age of 5 with the baker's son, Romeo and Juliet in the Vallès Oriental. Our parents were enemies, a matter of financial interests. I'll buy you a ranch in Texas when we get married and grow up, he told me, hiding in the doorway after Sunday school. He too left me for a girl with blonde hair and loose and wavy curls. As hair began to grow around our genitals, the great sin that those concealed, according to what they told us of Sunday school, made them so ugly that many years passed before I dared to look at them closely. In any case, genitals were unnecessary in those tender days. Holding a boy's hand, unless it was under the priest's instructions during catechism, was a sin serious enough to send you to hell. If someone saw your knickers, you had to go to confession, just in case it had been a condemnable oversight. All of this created a planet of imaginary desires that set the flesh on fire with a single male's glance.
So we could probably spend the rest of the evening talking about all the many things within this fragment. I thought it was very interesting because it starts with Joia de Poble, which in Catalan means being from a village, but it's usually used very in a pejorative sense. Oh, that person is the Poble. What do they know? And that's quite something I would like to reflect to somebody who then goes to big cities in Europe. The other one is the background of Catholicism in a rural environment, the element of guilt. Again, compare that to London in the 80s, for instance. What a massive contrast. And finally, the Prince Charming. Apologies. No, we haven't got to the Prince Charming yet. That's my fault. That's what happens when you improvise. Then you get out of the script. So let's talk about the contrast between rural, urban, Spain, coming out of a dictatorship, rather backwards society, and then that was the time. No internet, no much knowledge. So that's something that in the book appears quite often, and I would like you to elaborate on that a bit more, about these feelings, about this experiencing of a different life, and sort of the weight from the past, if you would.
Well, I think it's important to say, remember that we're talking about Catalonia, yeah? Catalonia, as we very well know, it's a very different part of Spain, if it is a part of Spain. And I think that, religion was very important. I lived very close to the church, so it was impossible not to have to go to all the sessions that the priest organized. But also, something which is very interesting is that I don't know one single woman of my generation that was not abused by a priest one way or another. There were very mild abuse, if you like, but anyway, there was something, like sitting in the back of a car, and the priest would be in the middle, and he would insist that the girls would be one at either side, and he would be feel entitled to touch your breast, I think this is a form of abuse, yeah? But that was the norm, yeah? So I think that the women of my generation, we all experienced this. So religion, when you were a child, yes, we were very thoroughly influenced by that. But as you grew old, reality presented a very, very different story. So sure, yes, religion had an important, and in the village even more so. And again, it depends what kind of background you came from. My parents were very colorful. They did theater, and my father wrote plays, and so I had this backing. So I wasn't, I suppose, a typical little girl from the mountains like Sots, for instance. Yeah. So that was present, but on the side. And of course, that's absolutely true that when I arrived to England, it was an extraordinary shock. I had been to Paris and to Amsterdam, but it was something else. When I arrived here, it was an extraordinary shock what I found. I arrived to Heathrow and I thought that was London. It was just the airport, So, and of course, the characters is trying to portray all those experiences. I mean, it's fictional, but there is an awful lot of things which are really experienced. So yeah, there was a big contrast, but also I think it's important to point out that, religion already had a very bad name, so that was in our favor, if you see what I mean. You could sort of see the wood from the trees.
Distance. Thank you.
So, tota institució té una línia que li dona al grup d'ensenyants que la composen. Els professors mai discutien entre ells. Tothom esperava que algú prengués compromís amb alguna afirmació i els altres la seguien en un moviment ritual del cap. Mentre a l'acadèmia va haver-hi el panxa content rialler del cap d'estudis, la línia incloïa una varietat d'estils i actituds. Hi havia una mica de tot. Les tendències, però, sortien de les galeries d'art comercials, que marcaven la pauta sense cap mena de dubte. Formes que volien ser molt primitives, però a les quals faltava l'element humà. En certa manera, l'acadèmia volia la puresa de la forma, esprement tot el voluptuós de qui la construïa. L'austeritat, la cara seriosa, l'estalvi, l'abstinència, tots eren amics del procés. I regnava l'actitud de treballar hores i hores, fent malbé olis i teles intentant crear alguna cosa tan personal que hi mancava la persona.
Every institution has a line determined by the group of teachers who make it up. The professors never argued among themselves. Everyone waited for someone to commit to a statement, and the others followed it with a ritual nod of the head. While the academy had the cheerful, pot-bellied head of studies, the line included a variety of styles and attitudes. There was a bit of everything. The trends, however, came from commercial art galleries, which set the standard without any doubt. Forms that wanted to be very primitive but lacked the human element. In a way, the academy sought purity of form by squeezing out all the voluptuousness of those who created it. Austerity was the real thing, the serious face, thrift, abstinence, all shared that idea. They all believed in working hour after hour, ruining tubes of oils and canvases, trying to create something so personal that the person themselves disappeared completely.
So throughout the book, the protagonist goes through positive and bad experiences with academia. This fragment includes the bad experience, and the reason I chose it is because it also combines this with a reflection on the creative process. But I was sort of surprised again in an academic environment. I would have imagined that fostering artistic expression would have been sort of one of the main tenets, and it doesn't seem to be the case in this particular situation. So again, I would value your reflections on this, both the creative process and strict academia like the one described here.
Well, I think in the book I mention two types of academia. Yeah? I mean, here in London, I was extremely privileged because I was studying, character, I was studying in the Royal College of Art at a time in which you had people like Peter de Francia or Ken Keefe or John Golding, which were particular artists with a very, very open mind. And so it was a privilege to be there, and I really learned a lot from them. And they were extremely liberal. It doesn't mean that they weren't strict, of course they were. But going to Holland, Holland is the academia per se. England does not have a very huge tradition of artists, of painters. Yeah? Very good at doing music and writing, but painting is not. It's not comparable to what the Dutch have done, or the Spaniards, or the French. Yeah? So the academia is very, very strong. Much more difficult to break, I suppose, in that sense. And the irony was that I went to Amsterdam thinking that cannabis, freedom, all that kind of stuff, and I encountered a very, very different kind of city. Yeah, you could be smoking a joint in the academia, but there were issues that were almost like Calvinistic. So that was the contrast. So London had given me an openness, Amsterdam was closing. But again, there was it was very interesting because, I actually tried to filter from all this and then invested into my painting, But yeah, what I describe is definitely something that I experienced, which was the contrast of what I had experienced in England.
Thank you.
Florian, es deia Florian. Feia anys havia conegut un capellà francès que també es deia Florian. Me'n vaig al taller, li vaig dir. M'agrades, però me n'haig d'anar. A la porta d'Albana em va fer un petó. Sentia una força que volia rapar-se a ell, però me'n vaig anar. Al taller hi feia fred. Vaig dormir poc. L'endemà, mentre esmorzava al bar dels treballadors del mercat de darrere l'acadèmia, recordava en Florian i en Henk. Vaig tenir un dia força lent. Els pinzells s'enganxaven a la tela. Sentia una depressió coneguda i desagradable omplir-se dintre meu. Ansietat, frustració, soledat, problemes a Londres, poques peles. Què em passava a mi? Un munt d'homes entraven i sortien en la meva vida com si fos una sala d'espera. On era el meu príncep blau?
Florian, his name is Florian. Years earlier, I had known a French priest who was also named Florian. I'm going to the studio, I told him. I like you, but I have to go. At the door of the vana, he kissed me. I felt a force that wanted to cling to him, but I left. It was cold in the studio. I slept little. The next day, while having breakfast at the workers' bar behind the Academy Market, I remembered Florian and Henk. I had a rather slow day. The brushes stuck to the canvas. I felt a familiar and unpleasant depression filling me from within. Anxiety, frustration, loneliness, problems in London, little money. What was happening to me? A stream of men passed in and out of my life as if it were a waiting room. Where was my Prince Charming?
So here the Prince Charming that I wrongly mentioned before, such was my shock when I read this Prince Charming. A woman who breaks with convention, past tradition, exploring and all these different partners, and then Prince Charming. But that was, I thought, relegated to the old Walt Disney films. So tell me about it.
I suppose first we should define what is a Prince Charming.
Yes.
I mean, probably a Prince Charming for you is something very different than a Prince Charming for a woman, And I could also say that, I think that the Prince Charming is something that it's not necessarily the one and only. I mean, you can have several Prince Charming all through life, And so I think that the concept of it is actually a healthy concept. You want a companion, someone who you feel attracted to, that you can share so many things with. That is the Prince Charming. So it doesn't, for example, I have a cousin that loves eating, and she married a guy who loves eating too. They both terribly fat, very unhealthy, very ugly, but they're really happy. So he's found a Prince Charming. So, that is a Prince Charming,
Understood. Thank you.
Gairebé tots els pintors que per mi ho són de veritat tenen una muller que per regla general és voluntàriament silenciosa i desapercebuda, que és el seu eix en tots els sentits. Rarament la dona d'un gran pintor pot desenvolupar la seva creativitat. És un eix que no es veu, però que si no hi fos, tot moviment seria impossible. Potser el meu error va ser creure que en Nigel era el meu eix. També ell era pintor. El fet de ser un home ja mai podria ser silenciós i desapercebut. D'altra banda, no crec pas que un home amb aquestes característiques pogués ser l'equivalent de la muller dels bons pintors. Fa massa segles que repeteixen que l'home ha de ser potent, viril, el número 1 en la relació estereotipada de parella. En Florian és un dels homes més forts, virils i potents que he conegut mai. En canvi, als ulls de la nostra societat és solament un maric afeminat.
Almost all the painters who, for me, truly are painters, have a wife who is generally voluntarily silent and unnoticed, who is their axis in every sense. Rarely can the wife of a great painter develop her own creativity. She is an axis that cannot be seen, but without which any movement would be impossible. Perhaps my mistake was believing that Nigel was my axis. He too was a painter. By virtue of being a man, he could never be silent or unnoticed. On the other hand, I don't believe a man with such characteristics could be equivalent to the wives of good painters. For too many centuries it has been repeated that a man must be powerful, virile, and number one in the stereotypical couple relationship. Florian is one of the strongest, most virile and powerful men I've ever known, yet in the eyes of our society he is merely an effeminate poster.
So my question here is, what will it take for society to change this deep-seated attitude, if it will ever change?
Well, I wish I had the answer, but I think what is important to say is that maybe what we got wrong is the position of the wife. You see what I mean? Maybe it's about time that women are not so absolutely devoted and abandoned to please the man. And maybe that is the error. Rather than we trying to spy to have a partner which is the equivalent to that, what we should do is destroy him first, and then maybe that would make relationships more successful.
I think you and I, we talked a bit because Mahler features in the book, and I mentioned Alma Mahler, how difficult it was for her to to continue composing until she told him to get lost, which I think was very brave of her. And we also mentioned, the idea of the muse, the feminine muse. And I mean, there are so many elements that point towards the male creator and the woman supporting or inspiring for centuries and centuries. That changing that is certainly.
But I think it's also important to say that the muses are indispensable. I mean, without my muses, I would never been able to paint. So it's just a matter of attitudes, really. Because this kind of fascination for a very beautiful woman or a very beautiful man, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you can squeeze it and actually get something out of it, But I think what's wrong is this kind of cliche attitude of total surrender. That is, I think, what's wrong.
Thank you.
Mai havia treballat tan de pressa en ma vida. Jo, que era inexperta, tenia 17 cambres per netejar. Eren repartides en diversos pisos. A cada pis es parlava una llengua diferent. Portuguès, francès, àrab, castellà, anglès. Pujar i baixar el carro de neteja ple de llençols, coixineres i estris de neteja era tota una aventura. Les portes de l'ascensor es tancaven massa de pressa. Sovint encara tenia la galleda i el pal de fregar fora i l'ascensor ja se n'anava cap amunt o cap avall per parar-se on hi havia una altra cambrera intentant fer el mateix que jo. Ens en rèiem, tot i que hi havia una dona àrab que feia veure que s'enfadava i em renyava en holandès. Jo em disculpava i premia el botó de nou per anar a recollir la galleda abandonada. Aquesta dona em va deixar una impressió molt forta.
I've never worked so fast in my life. Inexperienced though I was, I had 17 rooms to clean. They were spread over several floors. On each floor, a different language was spoken: Portuguese, French, Arabic, Spanish, English. Pushing the cleaning cart full of sheets, pillowcases and cleaning supplies up and down was quite an adventure. The lift doors closed too quickly. Often I still had the bucket and mop outside, while the lift was already going up or down, stopping where another maid was trying to do the same thing as me. We laughed about it, although there was an Arab woman who pretended to be angry and scolded me in broken Dutch. I apologised and pressed the button again to retrieve the abandoned bucket. That woman left a very strong impression on me.
I chose this paragraph because I think it is still very applicable today in the story of many migrants in Europe, the story of survival but also resilience. So I would like to know your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, I mean, that was an extraordinary experience. And the Arab woman that I mentioned, funnily enough, was extremely liberal. I mean, if you heard her talk about sex, you wouldn't believe it. So, yes, I think, I suppose that's how can I say that? I mean, when you are a foreigner, or especially at that time, I mean, most of the people that were in that hotel cleaning were paid very, very badly and were living in appalling conditions. And I mean, I was the artist. I mean, we the artists always are slightly different. But yeah, I mean, there was abuse, there was all the kind of things which you associate immigrants with, So it's the life of an immigrant is not easy at all, And that was an interesting situation because at every floor you had a different nationality. But we used it as a way of sort of entertaining ourselves while we clean, And so the Portuguese were here, the Italians were there, and we understood each other in broken Dutch, So it was extremely enlightening. And yeah, I mean, immigration is immigration everywhere in the world, and it's not easy and it's not fun. It's hard. Okay. Els diumenges a les 5 de la matinada hi havia un míting a Barcelona. Després d'haver treballat a la fàbrica tota la setmana i haver-nos hagut de llevar a les 4 de la matinada, el diumenge, que era l'únic dia que podíem dormir, allí anàvem amb la moto morts de fred a l'hivern, ja que tot això passava a l'hivern. Allí explicaren què era el marxisme. Recordo unes explicacions que feia un home barbut i amb ulleres que jo considerava molt lleig, però que totes les altres dones adoraven com si fos Paul Newman en persona. Mai vaig entendre res del que ens deien. Em ve a la memòria alguna cosa sobre els homes de les cavernes, el descobriment del foc. I després de tot això, ja sols recordo el que em deien sobre els andalusos a Catalunya, que els haurien de retornar al seu país. Aquí, per primera vegada, vaig entendre alguna cosa sense que ni la meva germana ni el xicot haguessin d'explicar-m'ho més clarament. Al poble hi tenia una amiga, la Carmen. Era filla d'emigrants de Jaén, i jo sabia prou bé que Jaén era Andalusia. Per tant, era clar que si aquella gent tornava la Carmen a Andalusia, jo no la veuria més. Aquí va acabar-se la meva consciència política i marxista, tal com jo l'entenia. Tot va venir junt. Vaig deixar el xicot i la política.
On Sundays, early at 5 in the morning, there was always a clandestine meeting in Barcelona. After working in the factory all week and having to get up at 4 in the morning, on Sunday, the only day we could sleep, we went to the rally on the motorbike, freezing cold in winter, since all this always happened in winter. There they explained to us what Marxism was. I remember some descriptions given by a bearded man with glasses, whom I considered very ugly, but whom all the other women adored as if he were Paul Newman himself. I never understood anything they told us. I vaguely remember something about cavemen, the discovery of fire. And after all that, I only remember what they told us about Andalusians in Catalonia, that they should be sent back to their country. It was here that I understood something for the first time without my sister or my boyfriend having to explain it more clearly. In the village I had a friend, Carmen. She was the daughter of immigrants from Jaén, and I knew perfectly well that Jaén was in Andalusia. Therefore, it was clear that if those people were sent back, Carmen would return to Andalusia and I would never see her again. That was the end of my political and Marxist consciousness as I understood it. Everything came together. I left my boyfriend and politics.
I selected this one because it, again, very relevant, the ugly side of nationalism, so that's important. However, what I wanted to reflect is there was also very inclusive nationalism and independentism at the time in Catalonia. And I remember, for instance, PSUC was extremely. So I just wanted to reflect on this because it's the only mention, a very valid point, but it's the only mention of politics in the book.
Well, I think it's important to mention, remember that this is a 14-year-old girl talking. Yeah? So what this 14-year-old character knew about Marxism and politics was zero. She simply followed, the older sister and would go and burn flags and all this kind of thing because, she trusted that the sister knew what she was doing. But yeah, absolutely true. You had the PSUC, which was a political party which, had an extraordinary impact in Catalonia, and they were not in favor of sending anybody back to anywhere. And they weren't even independentists. Yeah? But that, I suppose, is the tragedy. Yeah? Here in England, because you have Great Britain, you can be Scottish, or you can be Wales, or you can be North Irish, and nobody is upset. But in Spain, if you say, I'm not Spanish, I'm Catalan, people get offended. They believe that, you are actually looking down at the Spaniards, which is not the case, So, that it's something which is worth pointing out. But in here, the character is just having a little bit of a taste of it, And that's how she understood it, which I suppose is, in a way, it's interesting, yeah. It affected her personally, If Carmen was sent to Jaén, that was the end of Carmen, yeah. And she knew that, life for Carmen wasn't easy. To go back to Andalusia meant poverty and probably starvation, So that's the character.
And I think it's very enduring, and actually it made me laugh, and the point of view of the 14-year-old, that this bandit guy, not particularly handsome, but erotic of power, becoming the Paul Newman for...
Oh yeah. Well,
so
that
it
was
made me
the
laugh.
issue of beauty in those days, very full of beard and long hair, and probably quite ugly, so that gave him the sort of the touch of
Right.
being very handsome. L'amor té molts colors, i tan vàlid és l'un com l'altre. Ens han explicat que el verd i el blau són discrets i el vermell o el groc són vistosos. La veritat és que cadascú ha de trobar les barreges adequades de colors a dins. Aquest és el verdader pot màgic, on no hi ha errors possibles.
Love has many colours, and one is just as valid as another. We've been told that green and blue are discreet, while red or yellow are loud. The truth is that everyone must find the right mixture of colours within themselves. This is the true magic pot where mistakes are impossible.
And I don't have any comment on this one. I just selected it because I found it extremely beautiful. It links both the writing and the painting. And phonetically, I love it, how it sounds in Catalan. So that's it.
L'amor veritable és per sempre. Res no el pot destruir. Si s'acaba és que no era prou fort. Per estimar fa falta una totalitat, els dos perfectes mitjos, com deia Plató. Potser la meva aportació a les teories de la perfecció seria el concepte de temps. Per sempre vol dir sensació viscuda, sensació acumulada. Per sempre és el moment sentit en tota la seva totalitat. I és per sempre perquè un cop viscut ja no es pot treure de dins mai més.
True love lasts forever. Nothing can destroy it. If it ends, it is because it was not strong enough. To love requires a wholeness, the two perfect halves, as Plato said. Perhaps my contribution to the theories of perfection would be the concept of time. Forever means a lived sensation, an accumulated sensation. Forever is the moment felt in its full totality, and it is forever because once it has been lived, it can never be removed from within you again.
So let's get a bit philosophical here, because my impression is that there is still a sense of longing from the protagonist, and in theory, if the forever is forever, the longing wouldn't be there. Does it make sense? My comment, and that's my personal perception.
Yeah, but again, what's life without longing? It's like asking a flower to stop blooming because she knows she's going to die. You can't do it, So the flower knows she's going to die, but it doesn't stop her from blooming, So I suppose longing is the essential part of life, so you can't really live without it.
Thank you. The book then, very interestingly, has a reflection on two paintings that are displayed here. So what I would like is Eva to have a bit of a discussion around the paintings. The first one, because the title is in French, I would like, it's not this one,
This one is the Theatre Tutsuki. This
this
is
one.
the
The previous one, please. So because the title is in French, I don't want to ruin it, so please you pronounce it.
It's titled The Son of Adolphine, which is a character in the book.
Please go ahead.
Well, I mean, Adolphine was a lady I met in Paris, or rather the protagonist met in Paris. Remember that this is a mixture of fiction and reality. Yeah. And so Adolphine was a single mother. Apparently she had a crazy night with someone who played jazz, and the guy disappeared. She became pregnant and she had a son. Yeah. So the son of Adolphine was this guy that the protagonist has an affair with. Yeah. He's a muse. Yeah. He's a very handsome man. He's very young. It's the equivalent to a muse for a male. Yeah.
Yep.
And again, because the protagonist has problems and whatever. So I mean, this short relationship in Paris is important for her. You know. And that's what she makes of it. Yeah. So this is the painting that came from the relationship.
And I understand that this is Adolphine.
No, Adolphine is her.
Oh, apologies.
She's the lady.
Okay.
She is Adolphine.
So I got it wrong.
And notice that the picture is called The Son of Adolphine. It doesn't have a name.
Yeah.
It's the son of her, because she was a very powerful woman. He grew up in a community of gay men, because, you know, Adolphine had lots of friends which were gay. So again, he was a very liberal young man, and the mother was very liberal too. So you had a liberal woman who produced a child who happened to be very beautiful, and that I met and I had an affair with. But then, of course, at the end of the relationship, or rather the protagonist had an affair with, at the end of the relationship was chaos, that it always is, you know. Goodbyes are always painful, you know. And the painting, in a way, is a way of portraying all this emotion. Yeah. So it's, and I mean, and there is nothing literal. I mean, the only thing which I suppose is literal is Adolphine, which is the lady. But everything else is the feeling, is the relationship, is 3 million things, and many more. Because I mean, really, the fact that I call this the son of Adolphine is irrelevant. The painting could be called all sorts of other things, because I mean, at the point in which the painting becomes alive, it doesn't really matter what it's about, because, you know, it takes a life of its own. So then the painting decides what it wants to say and what it is about. So that's what's in here.
Thank you. Next one, please.
And this one, I mean, the main character, I suppose, in the book is Henk, yeah? And Henk is that's a very interesting character. And this painting, I suppose, is an attempt of the protagonist to get rid of him. Because, you know, he has really become very impregnated in her, and she knows that this is a bad decision. And so she uses painting to try to understand what is it that she's feeling, what is it that she's doing, and the painting takes over. So that's what came out of it, yeah. And again, you know, I call it Requiem's Requiem, but it could be called all sorts of other things. What's important is the painting, you know. Whatever is it that you see in the painting, whatever is it that the painting is telling you, if anything. And so it's almost like an exorcism, yeah? I mean, of course, the paintings, I painted the paintings, but I lent the protagonist the painting so that she can be in the book, yeah? And so that's what this painting is about. It's some sort of a volcano, and God knows what this is.
There is a sense of turmoil.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
And the third one, it's a happy one, yeah. I mean, I think in here I talk about my connection with the Japanese friends.
Yes.
And so the visits to the house of the Japanese girl were always very entertaining, and so it was always joy. And so I had an evening in this Japanese house, and we had a great time. So that's a celebration of that evening. So this is a happy painting, very, very happy painting. Yeah.
It certainly feels like that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what we will do now is we'll open to the audience for any questions you may have, either about Eva as a writer or as a painter, about Catalan culture.
We'll do first, we'll serve some drinks so people can be a bit fueled for their questions.
Yes, of
Sí,
course.
tendremos una copa. Sí.
Molt bé.
Sí, sí, sí.
Now you have time to prepare your questions, so you have no excuse not to ask. It's interesting because when I host Q&As at the film festival, usually we have very little time because there is next film coming, and people at the beginning are very shy, and then when the questions start, everybody becomes really excited, and then we don't have time because the next film is coming. And
So I'm kind of interested. Can I ask a question?
of course, yes.
So I'm interested in, I think they're superb paintings. I'd really like to see them in the flesh, so to speak. I'm wondering when you made them, kind of like, you know, thinking about your biography or autobiographical kind of scene that we're experiencing here, and also how big they are. So yeah, when did you make them? Kind of which year in your life, are they recent or?
Yes, I mean, they were the happy one and son of Adolphine were done at the Royal College, so we're talking about 1983 to 86.
Do they still exist?
Well, the happy one I sold, so I have no idea where it's gone. Thank you. But the other one, yes, the other two I do have, both of them. And they're quite big. I mean, the son of Adolphine, I think, is about 1.80 meters by 2 meters or something like that. And the other one is also quite large. You know.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Why did you choose to write it in Catalan?
It's my mother tongue.
But you've lived in England for so long. Why didn't you write another version in English, and would it be very different if you'd written it in English?
Well, my first novel was in English, which is called Foreigner, which I wrote a long time ago. And so I suppose I wasn't that happy with that novel. I thought that maybe I thought I knew more than I really knew. And then I thought, well, maybe the second one should be deeper. And for it,
Does the
I needed the
language
language.
put you in touch with something that you wouldn't have found in English? That's more my point. Does it connect you more directly to your experiences?
definitely. I mean, although I lived in England for 50 years and English is really my language, the language to which I educated myself, but Catalan is to the core of me, you know. I mean, so yeah. And funnily enough, you know, I write in English much better than I write in Catalan. So
May I say something about that? If I were in Eva's position, as it were, and Catalan were my mother tongue, this particular book has to be in the mother tongue. In my view, it has to be. I mean, you know, when we were doing these translations, Eva wrote the basic translations, and I just edited them a bit. But there were so many places where I found, being from a British Protestant background, that there were things coming out that they would have been missed completely if you were writing them in English. I feel the Catholic background and all that sort of thing. To me, it only comes out in the Catalan. I mean, yes, of course, it's translatable. Everything's translatable, but you don't have to go round and explain things in the same way that you do because it's the mother tongue.
And again, from an expat sort of experience, I think it takes some time until you feel you own the language to the point of expressing something very personal. And it's funny because sometimes people say, "Oh, so do you dream in Catalan, in English or Spanish?" I say, well, it depends on the context.
Yes.
One very basic question and then another one. I'm interested, what led you to paint in the first place? The other question is, you talked a bit about your process of painting. I wondered how that compared to the process of creating a book.
Mm-hmm. Why did I start painting? Well, I painted when I was 7 or 8. My father, made me a box where I could keep my oil paints and whatever. So yeah, I mean, I had this sort of introduction to painting from a very, very early age as an amateur, as a child in the village. But then when I came to England, I mean, I don't want to make publicity of England, but I mean, in 1973, England was a haven. I mean, I got scholarships so that I could study. I met extraordinary teachers, so England did me. I mean, I was, and so and then I realized that maybe it was possible to study painting seriously, which was a dream. For the nena, socaire, I mean, it was a dream. How could you be an artist? You needed to have a job and to earn your money. So it's something I had in me, and then England gave me the possibility of sort of develop it. And writing was the same thing. I mean, I was very young, and I used to go to my father's workshop. He had a typewriter, and I would spend hours in there, typing sort of things and pretending that I was writing a novel. So the two things have interested me always from the minute go, And I suppose chance and luck, when I came to England, it was possible for me to sort of finish my A-level. In Spain, in Catalonia, we don't have A-levels. I never finished my bachillerato. I mean, I think I went up to the year, I finished the second year, and I started the third, but I never finished it. So when I came here, I did the equivalent. I did O and A levels so that then I could go to art school and whatever. But the core was there, I was very restless. I was la nena del socaire, someone who grew up in the mountains and was full of passion and full of energy and didn't know what to do with it, And so she found a way of doing it, and that was through painting. I mean, I consider myself a painter. I'm a painter who writes. I wouldn't say that I'm a writer that paints, So I'm a painter that writes.
I think you haven't fully answered the question because you've perhaps been over-modest. How do you get scholarships to study at the Royal College of Art unless you're already a painter? You must have done some work that was...
Yeah, well, I mean, I did
submitted to competitions or whatever, yeah?
No.
Did you have a portfolio?
Mm-hmm.
Did you bring that from Spain or Catalonia?
No.
Or did you create it when you were in London?
Remember that I did my A-levels here. So
Uh-huh.
I did my A-levels. Then I got a place at Chelsea College of Art.
How? You must have... What were your A-levels?
Oh, I did an A-level in Spanish, it was so long ago I forgot. Another one in drama and theatre arts. One in English, which I didn't get a very good grade. But I got enough to be able to go to Chelsea College of Art.
But they wanted to see your artwork, surely. But
No, to actually do a foundation, no, I mean,
didn't? No, really?
Foundation.
You did the foundation, and then in the foundation
That's
you
when
did a
start-
portfolio.
yes, okay.
With the portfolio, you applied
Okay.
to the Chelsea College of Art, and I was very lucky to get a place, because, as you say, it was extremely difficult to get a place. But you know, the portfolio I made during my foundation got me into the Chelsea College of Art, and then when I finished at Chelsea, I applied to the Royal College of Art again with all the work that I did at Chelsea College of Art, and I got a place at the Royal College of Art. And so, and in those days there were grants. Not
Yes.
everybody
Yes,
got
no,
them.
I know now. It's
But I mean, you know, that's how. In Spain, that was a dream.
Can I quickly ask also in relation to your writing, when you were playing with your father's typewriter, you were typing Catalan at a time when you had no education in Catalan?
In Catalan or in Spanish, both.
Oh, in
But
Spanish.
at school, yes. I mean, I learned Spanish.
Not
Catalan,
Catalan.
we were not allowed.
You were illiterate in Catalan. Yes.
Well, I knew what I suppose my parents had told me, but it was illegal to actually
Yes.
learn the language. Yeah. And at school, if they heard you speaking in Catalan, the teacher would actually slap you.
So
Were the teachers not Catalan
Oh, no,
themselves?
of course not.
They were always from. Oh, right.
So did you learn Catalan from your parents
Yeah,
and the
at home.
community?
And in the street, everybody in the village spoke
Sure.
Catalan. That was the language of the village, no question about it.
it was the
Oral.
classic sort of divided situation where the official language is used for every public purpose, but families at home would still use Catalan.
And in the street.
And yeah, it's not unlike, I mean, it's unlike in many ways, but it's not unlike the situation in Wales with Welsh and English, except that since the beginning of the 20th century, Welsh was not actively suppressed the way Catalan was, but it was certainly regarded as, you know, the language of the peasants, as it were. And if you wanted to get anywhere, you had to be good in English.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, I
that in
remember
a
that.
lot of occupied countries.
I'm going to disagree with that slightly because I grew up in South Wales a long time ago now, back in the 1950s, when the sort of resurgence of Welsh language hadn't really taken
That
off.
was with, in
And
1962 it
South
started.
Wales anyway was sort of Anglophone largely.
Yes.
But what I found was that the teachers in the grammar school I went to were pretty well all Welsh speaking, and a lot of them hailed from North Wales. So there was this.
Yes, the language, we mustn't get off the track.
Yes,
No, I'm trying to make
Yeah.
another point about, because you mentioned Wales, and I have some experience of
So
that.
have I.
So, that's great. Yeah, so what, north or south? Because they are very different.
West,
Yeah.
southwest.
Yeah. So, but now I think it's definitely encouraged. I mean, Welsh is.
Oh yes, it is. But
Let's not forget that there are 12 million people speaking Catalan.
yeah,
It's
there
a
are still
considerable
fewer than a
number.
million speaking Welsh.
Yeah.
Aiming for a million.
That's terrific. I mean, yeah.
But unfortunately, I mean, we are losing the language because of immigration. There is an enormous amount of people coming from Latin America. They speak Spanish and they have no interest or desire to learn Catalan. Why? They can communicate perfectly well and the government doesn't encourage them, so the language is disappearing at an extraordinary speed.
So you're making a statement in writing in Catalan,
Yeah.
and are you fluent in Catalan?
Oh, yeah. More or less, yeah.
I mean, obviously, but I was thinking, you know, if it was a local kind of language, and I suppose they didn't want you to speak Catalan, so that happened in the communities, and that's happened in all occupied
Very true.
countries where the local language is.
It's taking away the formal teaching of the language. We all think that we learn language as our mother tongue, and so we speak it. But in fact, you don't really know the language fully unless and until you study it throughout your adolescence. and you learn the literature, and you read the poetry, and you learn a lot about the grammar, about all sorts of things. And so that's really the difference between, you know, having it as your mother tongue and being fully educated in it. And that, again, one can match that quite a lot in Wales.
So that must have been your experience that you were, you know, I mean, to write a book in a language that's not authorised, so to speak.
Yeah, but remember, I was writing it badly, but I was writing it.
Yeah, and it was
well
most
now,
of
I
us.
presume.
Yeah.
I mean, I presume that your literary talent writing in Catalan are excellent.
Well, I mean, it's
So you
improved, but I
practiced.
still need an editor when I write in Catalan.
Yeah.
So you had a corrector linguistic, a linguistic editor for this, did you? Right.
Well, I have a friend.
Everyone
Which
needs
is
an
an
editor.
extraordinary
Even
linguist.
when they're writing in their mother tongue, when you're writing for publication, everybody needs an editor, however good your language
I was
is.
very privileged to have a really, really good editor.
Right.
So, you know, and then when she respected my language very, very much, but she made sure that there were no errors whatsoever. So that's what happened.
So it was a sort of, you were a sort of split personality between Catalan and Spanish to some extent. Does that play out in your paintings as well? Is there something of a split between kind of natural and adopted language in your painting? I'm quite curious about the symbolism and how you separate between the actual narrative events and then the sort of weird symbolic things that happen around it. Is that a sort of another kind of sort of
Well,
corresponding split?
And I think I would say 3 languages, you know, because I've been in England for 50 years and I studied in English. I mean, English is a very important part of me. So I would say there is the 3, not the same thing. Spanish, Catalan or English are 3 different, very, very much so, yeah. And yeah, but I mean, I suppose really when I paint, there is no language, the language disappears. It's just, if there is a narrative, it's a narrative that comes out. I mean, it's to do with these crazy images that appear, and they have a life of their own, and and the symbology. I mean, as you know, I'm not terribly interested in the literal symbolism of my images. Yeah? I don't care. I mean, there may be something which definitely means something to anybody who sees it, and the painting is actually going towards that, but I can destroy it in no time at all. I mean, if the painting is asked, the painting is the one that really decides what it wants. So therefore, the languages, maybe they're not that important. Maybe they're not that important. I mean,
What about the nationality of the painters you're influenced by?
well, that's a very good question. I mean, I'm very influenced by Picasso and by Joan Miró, for sure. But equally, I am a great fan of Philip Guston, who's a Canadian Russian. Let's not forget. And so, I mean, does it matter their nationality? Miró, for sure. I mean, my connection with Miró also has to do.
Which Miró?
Joan Miró.
No, I mean which period?
All of it.
He died in his 80s, so what? Right from the beginning, right from realist landscapes to.
Everything. I mean, and Picasso the same, because I mean, really, Picasso's formative years were in Barcelona.
Yep.
And then from Barcelona he moves into Paris. Yeah. But yeah, and Salvador Dalí to a certain extent. I mean, I like Salvador Dalí as a mind, as a thinker. I mean, I think people take the mickey out of Dalí and they think that he's just being grotesque and funny. But if you really read what he wrote, he's a very serious person. But he presented himself in this manner because I suppose it was a system of survival. But yeah, I mean, I have a great admiration for him as well, and Philip Guston for sure. I mean, the abstract expressionists, yes, some of them, but again, when we talk about abstract expressionists, I mean, they say they're American. Were they? What does it mean they were American? They were Russian, they were Polish, they were all sorts of nationalities, and at home they spoke their original languages. So are they American? So, I mean, all that attracts me has got very little to do with North America. It's to do with, the backgrounds of these people and the things that were important to them, like Philip Guston, Was Philip Guston an American? I don't think so.
I think pretty well all the abstract expressionists, in a sense, apart from Jackson Pollock, de Kooning, for example, remained, I think, very, very Dutch right up until the end. I mean, he was essentially a Dutch painter. I mean, he grew up there and Gottlieb, people like that.
That's
I mean, New York was the centre of immigrants, isn't it?
And of course, Rothko is a great example of an expat. He became possibly, arguably the greatest of that lot, that generation.
Well, I think you need roots. It doesn't really matter where the roots come from, but
No.
you need roots. If you have roots, then that's it. You got a pot. But again, I'm contradicting myself because I'm saying that languages have nothing to do with the paper. But I suppose, one thing is you and what makes you move, and the other thing is what you're capable of doing on a two-dimensional space. Yeah? I mean, it's complicated. It's not so easy to verbalize it. Yeah?
Yes, it's roots, isn't it?
But with languages, each new language that you learn to a reasonable degree opens new spaces in your own personality. So people who, regardless of which is the mother tongue, additional languages make your personality more complex. Because
it opens doors.
it has different, you have different points of view on certain things. It's true.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, because when you mentioned before about the splitting, I thought I wouldn't consider myself as a splitting, but as more layers of complexity.
Yes, it's adding, not splitting.
But I think the same thing applies to imagery. I mean, Eva, you dig very deep into yourself to make the paintings. And if you dig deep into yourself and find a kind of Catalan self, then that must be coming through in the paintings too in some way. They don't look they look more Catalan than they would look English to me, for instance. There is something in them which is coming directly out of you, but because it's so much part of you, it's entwined with the language in some way. In a very nuanced and indirect way, but there must be something in there.
No, definitely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the roots are there and they're extremely powerful. I mean, I left my village when I was 20 and there is this extraordinary magnetism every time I go there. I don't know the villages. I have, I suppose, to a certain extent, very little in common with what's there. But there is this magnetism with the mountains, with something very difficult to put into words, but you feel it, and you feel it very, very strongly, and you feel it when you paint. But you can't, you don't have the words to explain it. Yeah? It's something you feel, and I'm sure it's the same with you, where you come from. Yeah, I mean, all that is in you, even if you can't verbalize it. And well, I mean, maybe you don't want to see it, but it's there.
Can I ask a question more related to film?
Yes, of course.
If you were making a film of the book, who would you get to direct it? And what kind of position would you take? Because you started off with a very clear sense of this. You could see the book filming in some way.
So it's very interesting question actually. I think Catalonia, in terms of, again, film, has always been more looking towards Europe historically, and more avant-garde, more adventurous, more political, for instance. and there is even a Catalan school of cinema. And very interestingly, because that's something, for instance, in the festival we look at parity, men and women, and I never have any problems with Catalan cinema because there is a huge amount of female filmmakers. I mean, Carla Simón is the more popular of them. I don't think her style would suit your book. I think Mark Hoyle, for instance, would be more suited. Mark Hoyle has a very interesting understanding of personal relationships, and especially in her case of Catalan society. I'm not saying your book is Catalan society, but she's got a very good understanding. And also, what we were saying before, it's the sort of more European artist cinema. So Catalan production team would be perfect for this story. No flourishes and more cinema verite in a way. So yes, probably I would go for Marcoli. We'll have a word with her. And that's a very interesting question. I think also in terms of industry, it's I would say it's better than ever. When Catalonia regained sort of political power, there was very little money, so decisions had to be made between television and cinema. So at the time they decided, let's invest in television because everybody watches television and that's going to be the best thing. Now television's settled, it's well established, and there is more investment in Catalan cinema. And because of Carla Simón as well, Catalan cinema as well. And the enfant terrible, Albert Serra, I wouldn't recommend him to you, but he's also very, very, very well known internationally.
I don't think we would get on at all.
No. I think we are running out of time. I would like to finish, however, with a question for Eva. Anybody has a short question for Eva?
Well, I had a long question.
Can we?
Well, I was very interested in what you said about the problem of artists' wives. And I was thinking of all the artist couples I know where the wife was in shadow until the husband died. Paula Rego is not quite in that category, but I mean, in her case, the husband got multiple sclerosis or something that became, so it enabled her to blossom. But there's a couple called John Bratby and Jean Cook. Are you aware of them? Jean Cook was very much repressed by her husband during their working lives, but I think after he died, well, I've seen an exhibition of her work, it's lovely. And who else was I thinking of? Well, I can't remember their names.
Roger Hilton.
Yeah.
No, Beryl. Hilton. That's
Roger
right.
Hilton.
Rose Hilton was also someone who
Yeah.
came to the fore after her. Yes. So,
Roger
but
was very flamboyant.
on the other hand, I'm thinking of all the women painters of the past who became, adept at on the technical side because they worked in their father's workshops. So the father being a painter was an important influence, and it also applies to many women writers of the past. That was their father's libraries that enabled them to become, writers. So I was wondering how far you can balance your relationship with your father and your emergence as a painter. I know he wasn't a painter himself, but he obviously was an important influence.
Well, yes, my father and my mother.
And your mother too, good.
Yes. And my grandfathers.
Oh.
So I think I'm a privileged village girl, because I mean my family was quite extraordinary. They were very socially minded, always involved in things. So funnily enough, I mean my background, and my mother was a very powerful woman, so she had an extraordinary impact on me as much as my father and my sister, who was the first communist mayor elected after Franco. So I have a very particular family, so I'm very lucky. So I mean, I have a very, very interesting family. So in that sense, but what you're saying, I think, as I said earlier, I feel that probably all these women that they invested themselves 1,000% in their husbands, and they sort of, they abandoned their career. In many ways, it was their fault. because I think we women tend to do this. It seems to be a female characteristic to be the surrender, to protect, to
No, I don't buy that.
Well, I'm not like that either, but I see it. The people you mentioned, why is it that so many women did not emerge until the husband died?
Well, because the husbands were
But why didn't they say to them?
yes.
Probably because they were grown up in a patriarchal society, as you say.
Yeah.
I mean, we are educated as this. We grow up like this, and I think now things are changing. But
no, that's true. I agree with you. Yes.
But it's about social.
Yes, the patriarchal society is still very, very powerful. Unfortunately, things are changing, but very slowly.
For example, there's this group of artists that they are called Gorilla Girls. I don't know if you know about them.
Really nice, yeah.
And they have a really nice, I don't know if like painting or poster, and it's ironical. And they say, what are the advantages of being a woman artist? Working without the pressure of success. Not having to paint in really elegant Italian suits and all these things. So, yeah, I think there have been a lot of artists, women artists, especially that are like they try to combat this, but still, patriarchal society is growing up, it's shaping us, and it's really difficult to break.
I must say that in this country we have a fantastic population of fantastic female artists. Tracy Emin, we have Bridget Riley, we have Rose Wiley, we have,
Jenny Savage.
an incredible lot of really, really brilliant female artists. Some of whom I've met, and they're absolutely extraordinary.
We also have an extremely strong feminist dance movement that was already kind of pretty developed by 1980. People like Susan Hiller and a whole host of women, Guerrilla Girls, who set that scene. They're amazing.
Excellent. So on that positive note, thank you very much, everybody.
So just to announce their copies of the book.
Yes, if anybody wants a book.
The other thing I have to announce is if you're interested in things like this, artists, writers, music, we have a concert this Friday. Actually, if you put up our site details, Centre for Catalan Studies, sign on to get alerts. We won't bombard you with material. We do an event about every month or so, every 3 or 4 weeks. They're all free, okay? And we look forward to seeing you. I'll get some cards out of this for you as well. There's a bit of drop of wine to finish, and feel free to stay for about 10 minutes before we're removed by the porters. Is that, Mr. Davide? Yeah.
There's more wine.
Please.
If anybody would like to buy a book,
Can I keep this?
Yes,
Oh, thank you so much.